Welcome back to Tell Me More Stories Told as Podcast. You know we love digging into the stories behind everyday things. And today, we're going on a deep dive into something you probably have tucked away in your medicine cabinet, the Band-Aid. It's more than just a sticky strip. There's a whole world of innovation and even a touch of wartime history behind this little lifesaver.
It's true. The Band-Aid's journey is surprisingly fascinating. What might seem like a simple invention actually has a rich backstory that intertwines with cultural trends, clever marketing, and even global events.
Okay, so let's rewind all the way back to 1920. The story begins with Earl Dixon, an employee at Johnson & Johnson now. Earl was married to a lovely woman named Josephine, who, it seems, had a bit of a talent for kitchen mishaps, little cuts, burns, you name it. She'd find a way to get them.
And you know, back then, treating even minor wounds was a bit of an ordeal. Sterile gauze, adhesive tape, it was all quite cumbersome, especially if you're trying to handle it all by yourself. Earl, being a caring husband, wanted to find a way to make Josephine's life easier.
So what did he do? He took matters into his own hands. Literally, he got creative and came up with the idea of combining a sterile pad with a strip of adhesive tape. And just like that, the first Band-Aid was born. It's incredible to think. Those early Band-Aids were handmade. Can you imagine?
It really speaks to his ingenuity and his dedication to solving a problem, doesn't it? However, surprisingly, these early Band-Aids weren't an instant success. It took a few years for them to catch on. It wasn't until around 1924, when Johnson & Johnson decided to shift to machine production, that things really started to take off.
Ah, the power of mass production. But what really propelled the Band-Aid into global fame was a historical turning point, World War II. Millions of Band-Aids were shipped overseas to treat soldiers on the front lines. Think about the impact that must have had, both in terms of providing much-needed aid and introducing the product to a wider audience.
It's a fascinating example of how historical events can shape the trajectory of a product. The war created this urgent need for a convenient and effective wound dressing, and the Band-Aid was perfectly positioned to meet that need. It's estimated that Johnson & Johnson has sold over 100 billion Band-Aids worldwide since then.
That's a mind-boggling number. Now, while the Band-Aid was proving itself on the battlefield, back home, Johnson & Johnson was already thinking about the next step in its evolution. And this is where it gets really interesting. They decided to tap into the power of popular culture. In 1951, they introduced decorative Band-Aids. Now, who wouldn't want a Mickey Mouse or Superman Band-Aid, especially as a kid?
It was a brilliant marketing strategy. They transformed something associated with pain or injury into something fun and appealing. Suddenly, getting a Band-Aid wasn't so bad anymore. In fact, for many children, it became a badge of honor, a way to show off their favorite characters.
And speaking of brilliant marketing, you know how we all use Band-Aid as a generic term for any adhesive bandage? It's become so ingrained in our language. That right there is a prime example of what's called a genericized trademark. It's when a brand name becomes so synonymous with the product itself that people use it to refer to all similar products.
Exactly. It's a testament to how deeply a brand can penetrate our collective consciousness. Think about it. Kleenex, Xerox, Q-tips. These are all examples of genericized trademarks. It's a sign of a truly powerful brand when its name transcends the product itself and becomes part of everyday language.
Before we delve further into the Band-Aid's cultural impact, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on any of the other fascinating deep dives we have in store for you here on Tell Me More. Now, let's get back to this story. The Band-Aid's journey from a husband's thoughtful invention to a global icon is pretty remarkable, wouldn't you say?
It really is.
Yeah.
But it goes beyond just the practicality of it. The Band-Aid has evolved into a cultural symbol. It represents care, comfort, and even a bit of nostalgia for many of us. Think about those childhood memories of getting a Band-Aid after a scrape or a fall. It always seemed to make things feel better, didn't it?
It's true. And that symbolism has extended far beyond just physical injuries. We use the term Band-Aid solution to refer to temporary fixes for complex problems. It's incredible how this little adhesive strip has woven its way into our language and even our thinking about problem solving.
You know, what I find particularly interesting is how something as seemingly simple as a Band-Aid can spark such creativity. People have come up with the most ingenious ways to repurpose them. Fashion accessories, art projects, you name it. It's become a blank canvas for imagination.
Okay, but here's a question for you. With all the advancements in wound care technology, things like specialized dressings and gels, do you think the traditional Band-Aid will eventually become obsolete?
That's a great question. And it really gets to the heart of the Band-Aid's enduring appeal. While there are certainly more advanced options available, I believe the Band-Aid will always have a place in our lives. Its simplicity, affordability, and familiarity are hard to beat.
You're right, there's something so comforting about the classic Band-Aid. Now, I've got to share a fun fact with you. Did you know they even make glow-in-the-dark Band-Aids? It's like a little bit of magic for boo-boos.
That's fantastic. It just goes to show how the Band-Aid continues to find new ways to capture our attention and evolve with the times. But at its core, it still represents that simple yet powerful idea of caring for ourselves and each other.
And it all goes back to Earl Dixon wanting to make life a little easier for his wife. It's a great reminder that even the simplest ideas can have a profound impact on the world.
Absolutely. And that's what makes diving deep into these everyday objects so fascinating. There's often a rich history, a human story, and a whole lot of innovation behind things we might otherwise take for granted.
Speaking of fascinating stories, the Band-Aid's evolution didn't stop with glow-in-the-dark versions. They've also tackled some important issues, like representation and inclusivity. They realized that for a long time. Band-Aids primarily came in shades of beige, which didn't reflect the beautiful diversity of human skin tones.
You're absolutely right. It's a great example of how even seemingly simple products can reflect larger societal issues. For a long time, the lack of inclusivity in Band-Aid colors sent a subtle but powerful message about whose injuries were deemed worthy of being discreetly covered. The introduction of multi-toned Band-Aids was a significant step towards acknowledging and celebrating the diversity of human skin tones.
It's a great example of how companies can use their products
Yeah.
to promote positive social change and make everyone feel seen and valued. But this also brings up an interesting question, don't you think?
What's that?
Well, if Band-Aids are so ubiquitous and have become such a cultural symbol, does that mean they've influenced us in ways we might not even realize?
Yeah, that's a very insightful question. And to really understand that, we need to explore the Band-Aid's impact on our collective psyche. It's a fascinating thought, isn't it? I mean, we've already talked about how the Band-Aid has become this symbol of care and comfort, but has it perhaps also led to a tendency to oversimplify solutions or to focus on quick fixes rather than addressing the root causes of problems?
That's a really thought-provoking point. It makes me think about the whole concept of Band-Aid solutions in politics and social issues.
Yeah.
We often see these short-term fixes that might alleviate immediate pain, but don't actually solve the underlying problem.
Exactly. And you could argue that the Band-Aid as a cultural symbol has inadvertently reinforced this approach. It's like we've been conditioned to think that there's a simple, readily available solution for everything, just like there's a Band-Aid for every boo-boo.
It's almost like we've become a Band-Aid society in a way.
Yeah.
But, on a lighter note, I've always been fascinated by the sheer variety of Band-Aids out there. We've got different sizes, shapes, materials, even waterproof ones. It's like there's a Band-Aid for every occasion.
It speaks to the company's commitment to innovation, doesn't it? They've constantly adapted and improved the product to meet evolving needs. Remember those flexible fabric Band-Aids they introduced? Those were a game changer for comfort and mobility.
Oh, absolutely. Those are my go-to now. But I think it also goes beyond just functionality. The introduction of decorative Band-Aids,
Yep.
and later, the multi-toned ones, shows a willingness to tap into cultural trends and address social issues.
I think that's a really important point. The Band-Aid, in a way, has become a reflection of our evolving values and priorities. From practicality to self-expression to inclusivity. It's fascinating to see how these values have been woven into the product's evolution.
So if we look back at the Band-Aid's journey, from a simple solution for household cuts to a global symbol with cultural and even societal implications, what do you think is the biggest takeaway for our listeners?
I think the most important thing to remember is that even the most mundane objects have stories to tell. The Band-Aid reminds us that innovation can come from unexpected places, that simple ideas can have a profound impact, and that everyday products can reflect the complexities of our culture and society.
That's a great point. And it reminds us to stay curious, to look beyond the surface, and to appreciate the fascinating stories that are hidden in plain sight all around us.
Absolutely. And who knows, maybe the next time you reach for a Band-Aid, you'll see it in a whole new light.
Well, folks, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into the world of the Band-Aid. We've covered a lot of ground today, from its humble beginnings to its cultural impact.
It's been a fascinating journey, hasn't it? And I hope it sparks some new thoughts and questions for our listeners.
I think it definitely has. So until next time, keep those minds curious and those questions coming.
And remember, there's always more to discover.
As we wrap up our deep dive into this world of the Band-Aid, it strikes me that there's one crucial element we haven't even touched on yet. the actual science behind it.
Ah, yes. The magic of adhesives. It's easy to take for granted that a thin strip can hold a bandage securely in place, but there's some serious chemistry at work.
Exactly. Can you shed some light on how these adhesives actually work? What makes them stick so well to our skin?
Well, it all comes down to molecular forces. You see, adhesive bandages use pressure-sensitive adhesives, or PSAs. These are designed to stick with just a light amount of pressure. They contain polymers, long chains of molecules that create a kind of web. This web forms weak bonds with the surface of your skin, holding the bandage in place.
So it's not like glue, where you need a chemical reaction for it to set.
Precisely. PSAs work through these weaker, reversible bonds, which is why you can peel off a Band-Aid without damaging your skin. And over time, these bonds weaken, allowing the bandage to be removed easily.
That's fascinating. But it makes me wonder, have these adhesives evolved over time? I mean, I remember the Band-Aids from my childhood sometimes felt a bit stiff
Yeah.
and would peel off too easily.
You've hit on a key point. Adhesive technology has certainly come a long way. Early Band-Aids used natural rubber adhesives, which weren't always as gentle or reliable. Today, they use synthetic acrylic adhesives, which are more flexible, breathable, and provide a stronger, more durable bond.
So it's not just about the cute characters or the different colors. The science behind the adhesive itself has played a huge role in the Band-Aid success.
Absolutely. The advancements in adhesive technology have made Band-Aids more comfortable to wear, longer lasting, and ultimately, more effective in protecting those minor cuts and scrapes.
So as we say goodbye to this deep dive, what's one final thought you'd like to leave our listeners with?
I think the most important takeaway is that innovation never truly stops. The Band-Aid is a testament to that, from its humble beginnings to its ever-evolving design and technology. It shows that even something as seemingly simple as a sticky bandage can continue to surprise and amaze us. So next time you reach for a Band-Aid, remember, there's a world of ingenuity hidden within that little adhesive strip.
Well said. It's been a pleasure exploring the world of the Band-Aid with you today. And to all our listeners, thanks for joining us on Tell Me More Stories Coldest podcast. Until next time, keep those minds curious and keep exploring the fascinating stories behind the everyday.